It's hard to believe it's been a year.
Hmm.
A year since those attacks.
Yeah.
It feels like just yesterday we were grappling with it all, trying to make sense of it, and now here we are, October 7th, 2024.
Hmm.
And it's like the world's moved on in some ways, but then you see the images from Israel today, those memorials, and it hits you all over again.
It's raw, still so raw for them, and I think that's something that's easy to forget a year out.
Yeah, absolutely. But even here, I mean, right here in New York City, it's impossible to ignore. Thousands of people are out protesting, and not just like a quiet gathering. We're talking Wall Street,
Right.
NYU, Columbia, Washington Square Park. It's everywhere.
Well, New York and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's a long, complicated history.
Right, of course, yeah. But this time it feels different, doesn't it? I mean, some of the reports coming in are describing these protests as, I don't know, angrier, more intense. They're talking about people stomping on Israeli flags at the Wall Street gathering.
Right. Well, you can't underestimate the events of last year, the scale of it, the hostages. It's like it ripped open old wounds and poured salt in them.
And that's not even factoring in everything else that's going on. I mean, all this national debate about U.S. foreign policy, our aid to Israel, it's like throwing gasoline on an already raging fire, especially with those hurricanes and the whole debate over aid money.
Exactly. It's all connected. You can't separate what's happening here in New York from the larger global context. It all feeds into that anger, that frustration.
And it's not just about the aid money, is it? I mean, you look at some of the messages coming out of these protests, the chants, from the river to the sea. That's not something you ignore.
No, not at all. That one's a direct line to some pretty extreme ideologies.
Yeah, it's not exactly subtle, is it? So for those of us who might not be up on all the nuances of these things, break it down for us. What does that even mean?
Okay, so from the river to the sea, right? It's usually talking about the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And basically, it's been adopted as a rallying cry by some groups who want to see Israel wiped off the map, essentially. They're advocating for a single Palestinian state in that entire area.
Whoa. Okay, so yeah, definitely not your run-of-the-mill protest slogan. And it's not the only one. Israel bombs, USA pays, that's another one popping up. But I gotta ask, are these messages really effective? It seems like they could backfire, alienate potential allies.
I mean, it's a valid question. These slogans are designed to be provocative, to get attention. Do they sway public opinion? Maybe, maybe not. The jury's still out on that one. But you're right, they can also be divisive. And there's a bigger danger, too. All this heated rhetoric, the constant clashes with pro-Israel groups, that attack on the Jewish community leader. It creates a climate of tension, even fear. And that's a breeding ground for things to escalate. And that's the last thing anyone needs.
It's a scary thought. And it's easy to forget, amidst all this, that there are pro-Israel events happening today, too. They've got that big concert happening in Central Park, supposed to draw a huge crowd, a bunch of big-name Democrats going to be there.
Right. I heard about that.
And get this, one of the speakers, she's a survivor of that attack on the Nova Music Festival.
Wow.
Remember that one? Last year, the terrorists stormed the concert.
Yeah, how could you forget?
I can't even imagine the strength it takes to not only survive something like that, but then to get up on a stage and speak about it.
No kidding. Talk about a powerful statement. I mean, think about it. A concert, especially one featuring a Nova survivor, it's like this message of resilience, of choosing to remember the victims without letting fear control them. It's a pretty stark contrast to what we're seeing with those protests.
And it's not just happening here. While we've got protests and concerts, internationally, things are still incredibly tense. The Israeli Air Force, they just carried out a major operation, hit like 120 targets in southern Lebanon.
Really?
Yeah. They say they were Hezbollah positions, but still, it's a reminder that this conflict is far from over and its reach goes way beyond Gaza.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Israel's been warning about Hezbollah for years. They're a powerful force in that region and right on Israel's border, too. So it's a tinderbox, and this latest operation just shows how quickly things can ignite.
And as if that's not enough to deal with, they've got this immense emotional weight from last year's attacks still weighing on them.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the images from Jerusalem today, the families of those still held hostage, heartbreaking.
I can't imagine.
A whole year they've been living with this, with no answers, just hoping and praying. It's going to be unbearable.
That hostage situation, it's like this open wound for Israel. Every day these families wake up and it's the same agonizing uncertainty. It just doesn't go away. Just this constant reminder of the devastating human cost of this conflict.
And it's like, it's not just happening over there. You know,
Mhm.
this tension, this anger, it's spilling over everywhere. I mean, we just got word that a Jewish-owned business in San Francisco got hit with graffiti.
Hmm.
And then closer to home, there was that incident at the CUNY Research Center. Windows smashed, divest now, spray painted all over. It's like,
Yeah, it's scary, right? Like, it just shows you how this conflict can spiral. It's a reminder that it's not just something happening in a far-off place. It's here, it's in our own communities, affecting people's lives.
yeah, it makes you think, Here we are a year after such a horrific event, and if anything, it feels like we're more divided than ever. Angrier. It's like, how do we even begin to move forward from
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Those scars, they don't just disappear overnight. Not after something like that. The trauma, the loss, the constant fear. It takes a toll.
It's true. But hey, speaking of moving forward, did you see anything about Mayor Adams at that concert earlier? He was there, right? With everything else going on, it's hard to keep track.
Oh, right, yeah. He was there, but it seemed like there was this deliberate effort to, like, keep him at arm's length. I didn't see any of the other big-name Democrats interacting with him.
Interesting. Well, I mean, with those federal corruption charges still hanging over his head.
Yeah, you gotta wonder how this is all gonna play out for him politically, especially here in New York. The city's got such a unique relationship with this conflict. It's gonna be fascinating to watch, that's for sure.
You said it. It's a lot to process, isn't it? I mean, it's clear that even a year later, the attacks of October 7th are still casting a long shadow. A tragic reminder of the human cost of this conflict, both in Israel and here at home. Makes you wonder, is there any way forward that acknowledges everyone's pain, everyone's loss, and still manages to find some kind of peace?
The million-dollar question, right? If only it were that simple. Look, I don't have the answers, but I think recognizing the depth of this divide, how real it is, that's got to be the first step.
So true. Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully this deep dive gives you, our listener, a better understanding of this complex situation and what this day, 1 year on, means for all of us. Thanks for joining us.